What if your eye color isn't just about looks? What if the shade staring back at you in the mirror is a hidden code, a living record of your ancestors' survival, migration, and the challenges they faced under ancient skies? From the deep brown eyes of humanity's first ancestors to the icy blue mutation that appeared just a few thousand years ago, every color carries a story of light and shadow, of climate and adaptation, of myths and mysteries passed down through generations. Think about it for a second. Why do some eyes gleam like gold and amber, while others glow an almost supernatural green? Welcome to Matter of Time, your destination for real, unique, and eye-opening stories. From hidden truths to fascinating events, we bring you content that informs, inspires, and keeps you hooked. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments, because every story is better when we experience it together. Why do gray eyes look like a storm frozen in time, while brown, the original blueprint of our species, still dominates most of the world? And here's the bigger question: what do those colors reveal about you? Because the truth is, the iris isn't just decoration, it's evolution made visible. It's biology, but also storytelling, history, and sometimes even myth. From the equator to the Arctic Circle, eyes have been shaped by survival, by sunlight, by isolation, and by chance mutations that spread across continents. Before we begin, pause for a moment. Look at your own reflection. What's your eye color? And where do you think it came from? Drop it in the comments. I guarantee you'll find someone across the world with the same shade, carrying a different but connected story. And if you're fascinated by the hidden history written inside us, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to discover will forever change the way you see the eyes around you, including your own. At first glance, eye color seems simple: brown, blue, green, just different shades, right? But beneath that surface is a far more complex story, one of genes, pigments, survival, and adaptation. It all begins with a single pigment, melanin. The same pigment that colors our skin and hair also controls our eyes. Think of melanin as a built-in shield. The more you have, the darker your eyes appear. The less you have, the lighter they look. But here's where it gets fascinating. Eye color isn't just a matter of more or less. Two key genes, OCA2 and HERC2, act like dimmer switches, regulating how much melanin ends up in your iris. And those switches weren't flipped at random. They were tuned over tens of thousands of years by the environments people lived in. Near the equator, the sun was brutal. Intense UV rays meant protection was everything. And dark brown eyes, packed with melanin, were humanity's natural sunglasses. Move farther north, where winters were long and skies were gray, and suddenly, lighter eyes had an advantage. They may have improved vision in low light, giving hunters and gatherers sharper sight at dawn and dusk. Even hormones can play a role. Some studies suggest that men are slightly more likely to carry lighter shades, while higher estrogen levels in women lean toward darker tones. In other words, eye color is shaped not just by ancestry, but by biology, adaptation, and even gender. Now here's something to think about. If you could rewind 100,000 years and look into the eyes of the very first modern humans, what shade do you think you'd see? The answer? Just one color. And that brings us to the origin story of eye color itself.
If you could stand face to face with the very first modern humans in Africa, there's no mystery about the eyes staring back at you. They were brown, deep, dark, protective. For tens of thousands of years, brown was the only eye color on Earth. Why? Survival. Brown eyes are loaded with melanin, giving them the best natural defense against the searing equatorial sun. Without that pigment, ancient humans risked UV damage and even blindness, fatal disadvantages in harsh climates. Brown eyes weren't just common, they were essential. They were humanity's original blueprint. Even today, that legacy remains. Around 80% of the world's population still has brown eyes. In sub-Saharan Africa, East Asia, and much of South America, that number climbs to nearly 99%. But brown isn't always just brown. Some are so dark they look almost black, until sunlight hits and reveals hidden flashes of gold or even reddish tones. What's fascinating is how the distribution of brown eyes shifts depending on where you are. In Southern Europe, in countries like Spain, Italy, and Greece, 70 to 90% of people still have brown eyes. But travel north into Sweden or Finland, and that number collapses to around 20 to 30%. Why the drastic change? Two forces: climate and history. Southern Europe had centuries of contact with North Africa through trade, migration, and even conquest. That carried darker genes northward. Meanwhile, isolated communities farther north allowed lighter eyes to spread with less interruption. So the next time you meet someone with brown eyes, remember, you're looking at the oldest story our species ever told in DNA. A color that safeguarded our ancestors beneath blazing suns and still dominates the human family tree today. But then, something extraordinary happened. A single genetic mutation appeared, and it changed the human face forever. About 7,000 to 10,000 years ago, in Europe, something remarkable happened. A single genetic mutation appeared, so rare, so unlikely, that it created an entirely new eye color: blue. Here's the twist. Blue eyes don't actually contain any blue pigment at all. Instead, with much less melanin in the iris, light scatters inside it, just like the atmosphere scatters sunlight to make the sky appear blue. That scattering is what turns the iris from brown to piercing shades of blue. One of the most famous examples of this mutation is Cheddar Man, a 10,000-year-old hunter-gatherer discovered in England. DNA analysis revealed he had dark skin but bright blue eyes, proof that this mutation spread quickly through Ice Age Europe. Today, only about 8 to 10% of the world has blue eyes, but in Northern Europe, they're everywhere. Entire towns in Scandinavia and around the Baltic Sea are filled with them. Why did this trait survive? One theory is adaptation to long, dark winters. Lighter eyes may have helped people see better at dawn and dusk, a critical advantage for survival in low light. Modern research supports this. A 2024 study showed that people with blue eyes performed better in low-light hunting simulations compared to those with darker eyes. In other words, the mutation wasn't just cosmetic, it was useful. And thanks to migration, exploration, and empires, the blue-eyed gene spread across the globe. Today, about 15 to 30% of North Americans have blue eyes, while in Latin America, it's only around 1 to 10%, usually tied to European ancestry. So if you've got blue eyes, you carry a rare Ice Age mutation that forever changed the human face and continues to sparkle in millions of people worldwide. But between the common brown and the rare blue lies a spectrum of shades that feel almost magical.
Between the dominance of brown and the icy rarity of blue, there lies a spectrum that feels almost enchanted: hazel and amber. Hazel eyes are like shapeshifters. Depending on the light, they can glow green, flash gold, or deepen into warm brown. This comes from a balance of moderate melanin mixed with a yellowish pigment called lipochrome. The result? An eye color that seems alive, changing with every glance. Only about 5% of the world has hazel eyes. But in countries with blended ancestry, like the United States, that number climbs much higher, closer to 18%. Geography tells its own story. Iberia, Spain and Portugal, is a hotspot where more than half the population shows hazel green tones. They're also common across North Africa, the Middle East, and Brazil, places shaped by centuries of cultural mixing. Hazel eyes are proof that history doesn't just live in books, it lives in your reflection. But if there's one color that has always carried the most fascination, the one that feels almost otherworldly, it's green.
If any eye color has ever carried an air of mystery, it's green. Only about 2% of the world's population has them, making green one of the rarest natural shades on Earth. But where they do appear, they're not random. They're concentrated like a signature of history. Take Ireland, Scotland, and Iceland. In these regions, surveys show unusually high rates of green eyes. In Iceland specifically, around 18 to 20% of women and 8 to 10% of men have them. That's nearly 10 times the global average. Among Americans with Celtic or Germanic ancestry, the percentage is also much higher, around 16%. So what creates green eyes? It's a delicate balance. Moderate amounts of melanin combined with lipochrome, the yellow pigment that colors hazel, plus the same light scattering effect that produces blue. The result is layered. Green doesn't sit flat in the iris. It glows through, almost as if it's lit from within. Historically, green eyes emerged where populations of brown-eyed and blue-eyed people mixed. Ancient DNA studies suggest they were present in Eurasia as far back as the Bronze Age. Some groups in southern Siberia likely carried green or blue eyes, fair hair, and lighter skin, traits that later merged into Central Asian civilizations. But beyond genetics, green eyes have always carried cultural weight. In medieval Europe, they were linked to witchcraft, sorcery, and temptation. Literature gave us the phrase green-eyed jealousy, tying them to envy and desire. And even today, people often describe green eyes as alluring, mysterious, and rare, qualities that science hasn't fully explained. Because here's the truth, no single gene accounts for green eyes. They're still something of a puzzle, an unfinished chapter in human evolution. If you've got green eyes, you're part of a tiny, extraordinary group, a rare genetic blend that's as much myth as science. But if you think green is rare, wait until you meet the shade that may be rarer still.
If blue eyes are uncommon, then gray eyes push rarity to another level. Depending on the study, only 1 to 3% of the global population has them, making gray one of the rarest natural eye colors on Earth. At first glance, gray eyes can look pale blue, but look closer and you'll notice something entirely different, a smoky, silvery cast, often flecked with hints of yellow, green, or brown. They don't just shimmer, they shift, like a storm caught behind the iris. Scientifically, gray eyes share the same low melanin structure as blue eyes. But there's an extra twist. People with gray eyes tend to have more collagen fibers in the stroma, the front layer of the iris. Those fibers scatter light differently, muting the blue and shifting it into a silvery gray. In other words, gray eyes aren't just lighter blue. They're a whole different scattering effect. Geography offers clues. Gray eyes cluster most heavily in northern and eastern Europe, around the Baltic Sea, Scandinavia, and Russia. Archaeological evidence even suggests that some Vikings may have carried them, spreading the trait as they traveled across seas and continents. But gray eyes also appear in unexpected places. Among the Shawiya Berbers of Algeria, gray or gray-blue eyes show up at surprisingly high rates. They're also seen in parts of Iran, Afghanistan, and northern India, likely the result of ancient migrations and gene flow from Eurasia. Because of their rarity, gray eyes often strike people as otherworldly. They carry an intensity that's hard to ignore, mysterious, unusual, almost unreal. That's why they're often described in myths, novels, and stories as eyes of ice or eyes of storms. If you've got gray eyes, you're part of one of the smallest groups on the planet, a rare shade that whispers of ancient migrations and stands as one of evolution's most unusual experiments. But the story doesn't end there. Beyond brown, blue, green, amber, hazel, and gray, there are shades so rare, so unexpected, they almost feel impossible.
Beyond the familiar spectrum of brown, blue, green, hazel, amber, and gray, there are eye colors and conditions so rare they blur the line between science and legend. One of the most striking is heterochromia, when a person has two completely different colored eyes, or even patches of contrasting color within the same iris. Sometimes this happens because of genetics, other times due to injury or medical conditions. Throughout history, mismatched eyes have fascinated people. From rulers to movie stars, heterochromia often became a defining part of identity, a mark that seemed almost supernatural. Then there's albinism, a condition where melanin is almost completely absent. With no pigment to block or scatter light, eyes can appear pale blue, violet, or even pinkish red, caused by blood vessels inside the eye showing through. It's incredibly rare, but it proves just how dramatically eye color can shift when melanin production is reduced to almost nothing. And of course, myths have added their own layer. One of the most famous legends is Alexandria's Genesis, a supposed genetic condition that gave people naturally violet eyes, flawless skin, and near immortality. There's no scientific evidence it exists, but the persistence of the myth shows just how deeply people connect eye color with mystery and magic. Even newborns reveal how fluid eye color really is. Many babies are born with blue or gray eyes, only for them to darken as melanin production increases over the first year of life. Watching an infant's eyes change is like watching evolution in miniature, an echo of how entire populations shifted shades over thousands of years. These rare and mythical cases remind us of one truth. Eye color is never just cosmetic. It's biology, yes, but it's also storytelling, culture, and imagination. And as science digs deeper, we're discovering that eye color may connect not only to ancestry, but to health, performance, and even how we see the world.
Eye color isn't just a genetic signature, it can actually influence aspects of health, vision, and even behavior. Scientists are only beginning to map the connections, but what they've found so far is striking. For example, light-eyed individuals, especially those with blue or gray eyes, tend to be more sensitive to sunlight. With less melanin to absorb ultraviolet rays, their eyes are more prone to glare and long-term risks like macular degeneration. On the other hand, this sensitivity may offer benefits in low-light environments. Historically, in the long, dark winters of Northern Europe, lighter eyes may have provided a subtle evolutionary advantage. Meanwhile, dark-eyed individuals, those with brown or nearly black eyes, have extra melanin in the iris. That extra pigment acts as natural protection, reducing the risk of certain vision problems caused by sunlight. Some studies even suggest that people with darker eyes may react faster to sudden movement, while lighter-eyed people may excel at endurance tasks and precision under pressure. Eye color has also been linked, though not always conclusively, to traits like pain tolerance, alcohol sensitivity, and even sleep cycles. For example, some research suggests blue-eyed people may be more prone to seasonal affective disorder, SAD, while brown-eyed individuals may produce less melatonin at night, leading to shorter sleep. And then there's perception. The color of your eyes may shape how others see you. In Western cultures, blue eyes are often linked to youthfulness and innocence, while green eyes are considered mysterious and alluring. Brown eyes are associated with warmth and trust. Whether or not these associations are fair, they've influenced literature, relationships, and even hiring decisions for centuries. In other words, your eye color isn't just a random trait, it's a lens that shapes both biology and society. But the biggest revelation is still ahead, because eye color is more than just about melanin or perception. It's a living record of human migration, evolution, and history itself.
When you look in the mirror, your eye color might feel like a small detail, but it's actually a story that began long before you were born. A story written in DNA, shaped by survival, migration, and the blending of countless generations. Brown eyes take us back to the very dawn of humanity in Africa, a universal shade that safeguarded early humans under a blazing sun. Blue eyes, born of a rare Ice Age mutation, spread across northern Europe and eventually the globe, creating a striking visual legacy that still turns heads today. Green eyes carry an air of mystery, a rare mix of ancestry and light scattering that has fascinated people for millennia. Hazel and amber remind us that human history is never uniform. Genes mix, travel, and reshape as populations interact. Gray eyes whisper of ancient migrations, storms frozen in the iris, a rare reminder of evolution's unpredictability. Even today, ultra-rare cases like heterochromia, albinism, and myths of violet eyes remind us that nature is still experimenting. Watching a child's eyes change from blue or gray at birth to darker shades over the first year is like witnessing evolution in miniature, a tiny echo of the patterns that shaped entire populations over thousands of years. The story doesn't end in the past. Science is pushing boundaries. Cosmetic procedures can now alter eye color with implants or lasers, while genetic tools like CRISPR raise the possibility of choosing eye color at birth. This opens a whole new chapter. When eye color is a choice, not an inheritance, what happens to the history and identity that once traveled in our irises? At the same time, the natural future of eye color is shifting. As populations around the globe continue to mix, the extreme concentrations of blue in Scandinavia or deep brown in Africa are gradually giving way to blended shades like hazel or green-brown. By the end of this century, hazel-like combinations may dominate, revealing a human story that is no longer tied to geography, but to diversity itself. So, the next time someone meets your gaze, remember, your eyes are a living archive. They hold the blueprint of humanity, a record of migrations, climates, survival, and chance mutations. They reflect who we were, who we are, and hint at who we might become. Look in the mirror again. What story do your eyes tell? Where does your ancestry trace back to? Drop your eye color and your heritage in the comments. You might be surprised how many people share your shade and how many of their stories connect to yours. Because in the end, eye color is never just cosmetic. It's biology, history, art, and myth all rolled up into a single glance. And when we understand it, we see not just color, but the extraordinary journey of humanity itself.